Hello everyone, welcome back to another Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, and this week I'm going to be looking at the Dissidia box starter deck thing. This thing here, with pretty artwork of Y'shtola. And it comes packed with a whole host of pretty full arts, non-foil full arts though, which is a bit strange, but yeah. And decent legends from various sets. As well as obviously you've got the starter cards, which are Opus 21, but you've also got this Y'shtola card, which is Opus 21 as well, but not a starter card, so that's interesting. It's pretty decent, but I'm going to be going just over the starter cards in this video, so I'll be going over the Light Barts, and then the Fire, Wind, and Ice, I forgot what the element was, cards in this deck, because I want to focus more on those, because Y'shtola could probably have a video dedicated to herself if I wanted to do one when Opus 21 actually releases. But without further ado, yes, I will be talking about the Dissidia starter deck. And Dissidia starter deck is actually something that, Dissidia as a form of synergy and kind of capitalizing on that category has been something that's we've been expecting for a while, because Dissidia has been in as a category in FFTCG since literally Opus 1. So it's always been interesting to see how they'll utilize it, and I think the starter deck is probably the best way, because rather than having like cards in a set which can then be utilized, obviously these cards will still be, I assume they'll still be accessible as foils within packs, but yeah, it's a good way to be able to do it, because it's a little self-contained package, and they can do some interesting things with Dissidia cards, but ultimately it's not going to become too overpowered, because it is just that, that package there. Not that starter decks can't become overpowered like the Avalanche or 13 decks were. And also, when I'm talking about, combos with these cards, I'll be talking about cards that are outside of the Dissidia cards, so I'm not going to be saying like, oh, Warrior Light works really well with Onion Knight, for example, because, that's a given, they're literally in the pack to be together. So, we're going to start with the foil Barts, the Light Barts even, and for some reason there is nowhere to be able to get these images online, so except for one, it's called Choco Stables, which I think's now changed its name to Materia Hunters or something. It's another kind of card tracker, and that was the only place I could get the images of these cards, and for some reason they're a bit sketchy in their quality. But either way, I'm glad they're there regardless. So yeah, Barts. He's a 4CP 8K light forward with the text when he enters the field. You may search for one category DFF character other than light or dark and add it to your hand, gain a crystal. And then you can remove Barts in the break zone from the game, gain a crystal. You can only use this ability if you control 2 or more category DFF forwards and if Barts is in the break zone. So the best thing about him is that he searches a character, so it means you can get your backups or monsters as well. Don't think there's actually any DFF monsters in the game, although to be fair there shouldn't be really, because most like Dissidia games outside of Opera Omnia don't have monsters in, so that'd be a bit weird if they do. But Opera Omnia does have lots of monsters, so possibly there. You might hear my cat meowing in the background, apologies for that. But yeah, ultimately he can search something, that's fine, gains a crystal as well, so some extra value. Obviously he can gain a crystal as well, which is nice, but you just have to have 2 DFF forwards on the field to be able to do that, which is where, a more stricter DFF deck will probably come into play. So, Penelo, it's a DFF card, Barts can search it. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, be able to search your backups, and backups are such. Other backups are quite nice. So if you do kind of get shafted with the fact that you don't get any backups, Barts into something like Penelo is quite useful. So a kind of rule of thumb is these cards like Penelo that have the artwork where for some reason the character doesn't have a nose, that's Opera Omnia. It does say at the bottom as well, Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, but all of those will be Dissidia or DFF. So normally it would only be the protagonists or antagonists of the games, with occasionally a side character, so Tifa for example, or Laguna. Yes, I'm calling them side characters, even though they're integral to the plot. But yeah, Dissidia Opera Omnia widens that and gives you access to stupid amounts of characters, basically all of them to be honest. But yeah, if they're a character with this cutesy artwork and no nose, it's probably Opera Omnia. Shantoto. So yeah, use Barts to find a board wipe if you need to. Now obviously playing Barts into a board wipe which will kill the Barts kind of sucks, and it moreover you then won't be able to use Barts as effect to gain the crystal, which sucks. But if you need a Shantoto, you need a Shantoto. Lady of Antiquity, and Delusory Warlock. So fits quite nicely into a mannequin style deck, and you're going to see this a couple of times now. It doesn't have to be just mannequins, obviously. It could be something just more focused on XF in general, because, you know, it can reduce their costs. But either way, being able to get a Delusory Warlock to then play your Lady of Antiquity, or if you've already got Delusory Warlock on the field, finding a Lady of Antiquity, you know, something like that, is very, very useful. Kimari. Barts. Play Kimari, give Barts a counter, I guess. Obviously, this is in a situation probably where you've hopefully got some backups down already, but if you're forced to, just playing Barts. I just noticed the Barts card image is really weirdly stretched. That's weird. That's a fault with the image, not with the actual card itself, I think, anyway. But yeah, this will be in a situation probably where you've already got backups down, so you're playing Barts maybe to find your 5th or 3rd backup, something like that. But if you need to, playing Barts turn 1 to get yourself a card like Kimari isn't the worst, because at least that way it's protected. It means it's a little harder for your opponent to kill, and you have gained a backup out of it. Alright, next up we have Onion Knight, so a 4 CP, 8k, fire forward. He has haste, and when Onion Knight enters the field, you may pay 2 crystals. When you do so, search for 1 category DFF forward, from my cat. When you do so, search for 1 category DFF forward, of course 3 or less, and play it onto the field. And he's got Sword and Sorcery S ability, deal 10,000 damage to the forward that blocks Onion Knight. That's a really good S. And he has haste, so that's pretty good as well. But ultimately I'm going to be focusing on the fact that he can search and play a DFF forward, of course 3 or less. That's pretty good, because there's a lot of good cards that includes. Zidane, for example. So yeah, playing Onion Knight to then go straight into Zidane is gross, because now you've got 2 haste forwards, and you have 2 triggers of Zidane if he's allowed to attack as well. So obviously his entry effect, and then attacking as well. That's a pretty quick swing in your favour. And Zidane is also in the right elements as well if you wanted to run DFF, Fire Wind, for example. So yeah, Zidane is also just easily playable, but regardless, paying 2 crystals to search this card and play him onto the field immediately is... Ugh. Y'shtola. So again, a similar sort of thing, because she can gain haste, but ultimately she can also not be blocked, similar to Zidane as well. Enters the field, take a point of damage, deal 4k to something, and then deal further 4k when she deals a point of damage to your opponent. But again, really, really nice to be able to just search this card and play it onto the field. Chelenka. So obviously you Onion Knight 2 crystals into Chelenka, discard a card into Yuri. Just a nice way to be able to quickly widen the board if you need to. Lulu. Onion Knight into Lulu. Get your summon back. I mean, Lulu's an incredibly strong card, so being able to Onion Knight straight into that card. Get a summon back from your break zone. Cast it. Minus 5k. Onion Knight attacks. They don't want to block, and if they're forced to block, it will probably die and not kill Onion Knight. Y'shtola, again. So, you know, Onion Knight in a Scions deck, maybe just as a one-off or something like that, might not be the worst thing in the world, because being able to search either of the Y'shtolas is pretty good, to be honest. And yeah, just playing her straight onto the field. And obviously we've got Grahatir and things like that that can search these cards and play them, but if Grahatir is already on the field or something like that, or Y'shtola died, Onion Knight straight into Y'shtola with a few Scions already on the field, not too shabby. Oh yeah, Onion Knight. So this Onion Knight, when it dies, you can pay 1 to then search an Onion Knight, play it onto the field. So Onion Knight into, or Onion Knight dies into Onion Knight to pay 2 crystals and then bring another forward onto the field. And the great thing about this is it can happen on your opponent's turn as well. So if you block with Onion Knight, for example, and it dies, bring in this Onion Knight to then bring in something else. That means on the following turn, that forward will be able to attack. So yeah, just pretty gross. And actually that could be quite funny if you did go Onion Knight into the Zidane, for example, because then on your opponent's turn you get a Zidane trigger, which they definitely won't be expecting. But the chances are you're in lightning water with the first Onion Knight, so this Onion Knight's a bit more of a tech, or the Fire Onion Knight's a bit more of a tech card just to be able to run with this one. Cloud. So there should have been a Barts included in here as well, for some reason there isn't, which is the Wind Barts. When a Warrior Light enters the field, you gain a crystal. Onion Knight, here's a job Onion Knight, so it means that when he enters the field, you gain a crystal, and therefore, if you don't have the crystal already, so maybe Onion Knight with the DFF Warrior of Light on the field and Barts on the field, you gain 2 crystals from Onion Knight entering. You then use those 2 crystals to pay for his effect as well. Cloud. So 5 CP, 9k. You can pay 2 crystals instead of paying the CP cost to cast Cloud. EX burst when Cloud enters the field. Choose one forward, deal 3000 damage for each category DFF forward you control. I mean, he's alright. It's a bit of a weird card because he's similar, I guess, to the Jekt from the 10 starter deck, but a little bit worse because Jekt has, I think it's a base of 4k and then 1k for each character on top of that, whereas this is 3k and it's only based on forwards, not backups as well, so a little less reliable, I think, but ultimately you can just pay 2 crystals, play onto the field, so if you're playing a deck with a buttload of crystals, it shouldn't be too hard to play him. So, Yuri, again, Yuri into Chelinka, got 2 forwards there, ready to attack. Just there already, but then you can pay the 2 crystals because ultimately you've paid 3 for Yuri, then a second card from hand for the Chelinka, so 5 CP in total, then get rid of 2 crystals, play Cloud into the field, that should be 9k. Obviously your opponent can break any of the forwards on the field to then reduce what Cloud would deal, but Yuri into Chelinka or vice versa is a nice easy way to be able to bolster your DFF forwards on the field. Yeah, the 13 engine in any what way you want to play it, because you've got obviously all the lightning cards, you've got the fire cards, you've got the ice cards, and it doesn't matter what element duo you're in, as long as you have 2 crystals with Cloud, you can just pay 2 crystals in any element and play them onto the field. And obviously all these cards like having lots of 13 forwards on the field, as does the lightning. Similarly, you've got the 10 engine as well, so obviously you've got the Yuna, Lulu, Jekt, and Tidus, and again, very easy to be able to play them onto the field. Now you could be in Wind Fire, so you have the fire you can naturally cast Cloud without having to use the crystals, or it could be a case that you're actually in the Wind Water version, and you're running the Riku backup, so you're still able to play Jekt, but you could discard Jekt for Cloud if you wanted to, or just generate the crystals to play Cloud, but ultimately you'll have all these DFF cards to be able to bolster what Cloud can do. And again, a card like Yuna, where either reactivates all your backups or plays a Guardian onto the field, that's pretty good for bolstering your DFF forwards. And yeah, just again, there's lots of DFF cards in the game, so that means Cloud should be able to hit, but ultimately your opponent can kill things in response to him entering, so he's a little less likely to kill things. Imaginary Soldier, as I said before, obviously Mannequins is a nice fit for most of these cards. They like to just spam forwards onto the field really cheaply and really easily, and if you've got 2 crystals as well, now the chances are you actually might not have crystals because you obviously want the DFF backups, but yeah, got things like Imaginary Soldier, I can't remember any of the cards, but playing Cloud onto the field when you've got 3 or 4 Mannequins on the field deals stupid amount of damage to something. Right, next up, Firion, a 2 CP 5k forward. With the text, when Firion enters the field, choose one forward, deal it 3000 damage. If you control 2 or more category DFF forwards, deal it 7000 damage instead. When a character your opponent controls put from the field into the break zone, gain a crystal. This effect will only trigger once per turn. So obviously he includes himself when he enters the field, so you only need 1 additional DFF forward, which is fine, but 7k damage is quite a small portion. So how many things it'll actually be killing, I can't say, unfortunately. Now, if you run it with something like Jin to buff up to 8, maybe that's alright, but again, it depends on, you know, there's ultimately probably easier ways of killing things or dealing 7k damage without playing a small, fragile forward like Firion. But anyway, I'm focusing more on his secondary effect of when a character is put from the field into the break zone, you get a crystal. So, Glaciella Wazette. Obviously, you can use her S by paying a crystal, so rather than discarding the S, you just pay the 2 water, remove a crystal, choose one forward, do 2000 damage for each character you control. That forward dies, gives you a crystal back from Firion. You can then use it again. So, obviously, Glaciella, when she enters, she gains a crystal, so you can do that, and basically, with Glaciella and Firion on the field, you could just pay 4 and 2 crystals to deal. It's probably a stupid amount of damage to some forwards. I mean, Glaciella is really strong anyway, right? And crystals aren't exactly hard to come by in water. But still, having it so that Firion essentially refunds you that crystal every single time Glaciella kills something is pretty good. It's also worth noting as well with Firion, it's when a character your opponent controls put from field into the break zone and gain a crystal. So if your opponent breaks a backup, say their Loporit or something like that, you gain a crystal from it. Bahamut, so before paying the cost to cast Bahamut, you pay a crystal to reduce its cost by 2. So Also, you reduce the cost to then cast him, deal 9k something, kill said forward, get the crystal back. So again, a nice way to be able to refund that cost. Finera Fens, so her cost is reduced by 1 for each crystal you control. She can become 0, which is really nice. And then when she attacks, choose all your forwards, minus 5k to stuff. And again, if you're killing stuff, you then get that crystal back. And if you can keep on reliably doing that, that means you will always have a crystal ready for Finera Fens to attack anyway. Just bear in mind that obviously these are 2 very fragile forwards, so they'll be very easy to be killed. Palom enters the field, pay a crystal, deal something 8k, get the crystal back. Same thing, just, yeah, different forwards. There's also Robel Akbel as well. Play him onto the field, choose a forward or a monster, and you break it, you get a crystal back. And like I said earlier with Furion, it's when a character is put from the field into the break zone, so if you break their monster with the Robel, you actually get a crystal back with that as well, which is pretty good. Shantoto. Now, this is probably my favourite of the cards in the deck. So when Shantoto enters the field, you may pay 2 crystals. When you do so, choose one category DFF forward or cost 5 or less in your break zone. Play it onto the field. Salvation Scythe, S, and Ice. Choose up to 3 characters, dull them, and freeze them. That's a really good S ability, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, the reason I prefer Shantoto over something like Onion Knight, where Onion Knight can search from the deck and play it straight onto the field, is thus it increases the breadth of forwards that you can play through their cost. Now, obviously, they have to be in the break zone already, but that's not really that big of an issue. Shinryu. So, it's a DFF forward. So, yeah, you play Shantoto on the field to put 2 crystals, or remove 2 crystals, to then play Shinryu onto the field to search whatever you want. Could be searching Shantoto's S to then, you know, just immediately use it. That's pretty good if you ask me. Xenos. So he enters the field from the break zone. You then get to play a character of cost 4 from your hand onto the field. So it's a character, could be a forward, could be a monster, could be a backup, who knows. But ultimately you gain a lot of things very quickly for 5 CP and 2 crystals. Cecil. Similar sort of thing, but different card. Cecil enters the field, play a character of 4 onto the field. If it's a 4 character, choose up to 2 backups, activate them, which is pretty good as well. But ultimately, you've now got protection with Cecil as well. Agrias. Now, Ice Water Knights have some legs. Obviously, you've got the last well when you play Knights onto the field to freeze things out, which is fun. But I mean, I think they just tend to fall by the wayside of maybe fire, water. But either way, I quite like Ice Water Knights. But yeah, Shantoto into Agrias. If Ovalia on the field, minus 7k something and draw yourself a card, hopefully. And then when Agrias enters the field, you may search one category FFT forward and add to your hand a damage 5, which is, again, pretty good. Realm. Shantoto into Realm, into 2 monsters. Yeah, that's a big field presence in one go. And Ramza. Ah, yes, I love this Ramza. So when he enters the field, choose one category FFT character other than Cardinal Rims in your break zone, add it to your hand, damage 5. When Ramza enters the field, you may play a category FFT character from your hand onto the field. So, Shantoto into Ramza into Agrias, maybe? Possibly. But the chances are that's not going to happen because, 1, you won't be at damage 5 because nobody ever lets you get to damage 5. But it's also a case of you're in 3 really weirdly placed elements at that point. Ice, lightning, and water are strange bedfellows. So, yeah, a bit weird. But that's not to say that it's not fun, and that's why we do this. Right, moving on to Terra. When Terra enters the field, your opponent discards 1 card. If you control 2 more category DFF forwards, you also gain a crystal. So again, she counts towards that, so you only have to have 1 DFF forward other than her. And then Crystal, Dull, choose 1 forward, dull it and freeze it, draw 1 card. Not too bad, but again, it's a forward. And that means you're sacrificing an attack. And yeah, not amazing. Waltrill, at the end of each of your turns, gain a crystal, so it means that you can keep on reliably getting that crystal for Terra, if you wanted. But ultimately, Go-Go is the best forward for this, because you use Terra's effect, choose 1 forward, dull it and freeze it, draw 1 card, Go-Go, dull and freeze another forward, draw another card. So 2 cards drawn, and 2 forwards dull and frozen. Not too shabby. Noctis. I have literally nothing to say about this card. When you must control a category DFF forward to cast Noctis. EX burst. When he enters the field, choose 1 dull forward. Opponent controls, break it. It's a Job Prince. He's a category 15, 3 CP, 9k. There's not much to write about this card, if I'm honest. You could maybe have Ignis, or use the newer Ignis to search him, or have the old Ignis to buff him and give him Brave, maybe. I don't know. It's just a bit of a dull effect. I'm not going to tell you how to dull forwards or how to cheat them onto the field, because that's all fairly simple. Yeah, sorry. Warrior of Light, moving into the wind portion now. So, when Warrior of Light or a category DFF forward enters the field, gain a crystal. This effect will only trigger once per turn. Then you can pay a crystal until in the turn Warrior of Light gains plus 1000 power. Warrior of Light cannot be chosen by opponent's abilities. So, as I mentioned earlier, Bart. So, when a job Warrior of Light, other than Bart, enters the field, gain a crystal. So, if you've got Barts on the field and you play Warrior of Light, you immediately go to 2 crystals. That's not too bad. Now, obviously, you want Barts on the field first, because that way you gain the crystals. You could play Warrior of Light onto the field and then gain a crystal that way, but then, unfortunately, Bart's is a theatre rhythm, not a DFF forward, so it means you won't get any crystal from him entering the field. Also, Warrior of Light only triggers once per turn anyway, but still. Yeah, having Bart's on the field, then into Warrior of Light, you've immediately got 2 crystals, which means you are only 1 crystal away from being able to use Bart's auto ability from a Warrior of Light dying and replaying it back onto the field. Ramza, play Ramza onto the field, and you immediately gain the crystal required for him to gain haste and his additional effects as well. So, nice way to be able to maybe threaten a little bit. Shantoto. So, this is a bit of a weird one, I admit, but play Shantoto onto the field, maybe at a reduced cost because your opponent's got no hand. You get a character back to your hand, but ultimately you gain a crystal with Warrior of Light. Then on your opponent's turn, they go to attack or something like that. In response, you cast Chocobo to put Shantoto back in your hand, or just some means of putting her back in your hand, but not Althea. Put her back in your hand, and then you've already got the crystal from Warrior of Light to be able to use her effect of pay 2 ice, a crystal, and remove Shantoto from the game, dull all your opponents forwards. So yeah, your opponent might not expect that because Shantoto is already there, but being a wind, you can easily get her back in your hand, you have the crystal, pay her effect. Cecil. Oh, I didn't remove the Warrior Light. I'm not comboing these two, don't worry. So Cecil cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. If Cecil is dealt damage by your opponent's abilities, the damage becomes 0 instead. And then the category DFF forwards other than Cecil you control gain plus 2000 power, Paladin Force, which is an S, and 1 wind. Choose one forward cost 4 or more, break it. That's a pretty strong S ability. And then he's a 4 CP AK forward. So, mannequins, obviously. And I think Cecil is probably one of the better placed forwards for mannequins, because giving all your mannequins plus 2k is pretty strong. Now, obviously, you have the false hero here, which is, you know, he's already gaining or giving buffs to all the other forwards as well, but they tend to be pretty small. However, Cecil will also buff other DFF forwards like the, what's his name? Xdeath, for example, who is also category DFF as well. Chalenka into Yuri with Cecil on the field. You've now got 2 instant 9Ks for 5 CP. That's not too bad. However, if you put Stiltskin in the mix as well, that means they are now 11k. With Leo, they are now 12k. Not too shabby. Cecil. So yeah, Cecil into this Cecil. It's a bit strange, I admit. But being able to break him and then immediately play him onto the field to then buff one of your DFF forwards might actually be quite an interesting play, because obviously you can play the other Wind Paladin onto the field that goes play something else and can make it so that your opponent has to make a payment for something, or you could play the old Opus 2 Water Paladin, which increases everything's damage and then can't take damage from certain things. However, Cecil buffs by 2, not by 1, and if you did play that Water Cecil onto the field and you hadn't already blocked, then he would have to block. This Cecil also has a nice air of protection as well, so ultimately this Cecil into that Cecil, Cecil into Wind Cecil even, to then buff your forwards, and then, you know, potentially block with something else or use something's ability to then deal damage, who knows. But yeah, just another option for this Cecil to be able to play something onto the field. Tidus. So, when Tidus enters the field, choose one forward your opponent controls, return to its owner's hand. When a forward your opponent controls is returned from the field into its owner's hand, draw 1 card and gain a crystal. This effect will only trigger once per turn, and he is a 5 CP, 9k wind forward. Also, weirdly, he's like the only card of the DFF cards that doesn't reference DFF at all, which is fine. But it's just strange that everything else at least has, like Cecil, for example, has a few abilities which are fine on their own, but then just that one additional DFF flavor text. This card, literally no, it could not be a DFF card, but I really like its effect regardless. Tross, obviously, is a very good play here, because Tidus enters the field. With Tross on the field, you get to bounce something, gain a crystal, draw 2 cards. Not too shabby. Strago. So, yeah, it's never going to happen, right? But this is one of the things I don't like about this game sometimes, is that there are so many cards out there that actually have some potential to be played, but because there's so much destruction and the game is generally trends towards the aggressive or the uninteractive. So like Wind, for example, it does its own thing. If it kills your board, it kills your board, but that's just a byproduct of it doing its thing. But yeah, Strago, pay a crystal, dull, choose 1 40 opponent controls, return to his owner's hand, draw a card. So obviously Tidus enters the field, bounces something, gains you a crystal, and you draw a card. That then gives you the crystal for Strago. You then use Strago's effect to bounce something, draw a card, and then with Tidus, draw a card again. Now, obviously, Tidus only triggers once per turn, so it'd have to be on separate turns, but either way, having Strago draw you a card, and Tidus draw you a card, but then regaining the crystal for Strago to then reuse the following turn, or in your opponent's turn, for example, not too bad. Obviously, you could combo that with the Tross as well, so Strago bounces something, which triggers Tidus, which triggers Tross, draws you 3 cards, regains you a crystal. That's pretty funny. If you've got, you know, Leviathan on the field, you're probably already winning at that point. But still, you get to potentially kill something else as well. Zidane, so he cannot be blocked, and when he deals damage to your opponent, choose up to 1 forward and return to its owner's hand. To be honest, this is like the only other Wind card that also bounces one of your opponent's forwards, but it's still pretty good. And it bounces something, you get to gain a crystal, and draw a card. Not too bad. Volker. Discard a water summon, choose a forward cost 4 or less your opponent controls, return to its owner's hand. Gain a card back to your hand through Tidus, and you gain a crystal. Obviously, with Volker, you're probably going to be running Tross as well, so you can probably get 2 cards to hand, and again, gain a crystal. And those crystals are very, very useful. And that is it, folks. That is the DFF deck. Now, obviously, there are loads of cards for each card that I didn't talk about that would be obviously very useful. For example, Iodolus for the Onion Knight would be quite good as well. Be able to play him immediately onto the field to then pay 2 crystals and play something else. You know, it's quite a swing in your favour. But, you know, I can't talk about every single card that works for everything. But please tell me something that you think is obvious that I missed. Pop it in the comments below. And please make sure to like and subscribe as well. It makes a big difference to the channel. Something silly like 80% of the people that watch these videos aren't subscribed. So please do subscribe, because I'm always putting out FFTCG content as well as my own Let's Play videos as well. So there is always a steady stream of content. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I will see you in the next video.